The people could use a hero. Fighting is the point. It's the best show in town.
What's up, everybody? And today we're talking about Spider-Man Noir. Now, I was apprehensive about watching this because, again, it's Sony, and when it comes to Sony and Spider-Man properties, you never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you get the Spider-Verse, sometimes you get Kraven the Hunter, you know what I'm saying? It's all over the place. But when they said that they were doing a Spider-Man Noir show, I was like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that, but, I felt like he was, a bit of a standout in terms of the Into the Spider-Verse movie. Alright, let's see what we got. Live action, where we got Nick Cage, he's doing his thing. And I checked it out. First thing that caught my eye, of course, and I feel like most people, is just like, you get there and it's like, do you want to watch the colored version or do you want to watch the black and white version? Which I thought was super weird because the whole thing, and I feel like the whole reason people even know about this character in terms of like mainstream people, and even some of the nerds like me, is just kind of like, from the Spider-Verse movie, and his whole thing was like, my world is black and white. So I was like, why didn't they just commit to black and white? I was wondering if it was that they're like, oh, if we do this in black and white, people aren't going to watch it, so we gotta do like two versions. And so naturally I watched this in black and white. If you want a a review on kind of like the differences and stuff, this isn't that video, sorry, but I was just like, I have to stick with what I feel like is the source material of like his world being black and white. That being said, I was watching it and I was like, there's something about the way that this looks that I was like, I don't think this was purposely shot to be black and white. I feel like they did something, and maybe it's just because I thought like, oh, I watched too many like videos about like CG and stuff like that. But then a video came out of them being like, hey, we had to figure out how to like reverse everything to look like it's in black and white, and I was like, I fucking knew it, vindication. So I just wanted to bring that up. But we're gonna start off spoiler free, and then we'll get into spoilers later. If you want spoilers, feel free to skip forward. This show is great. I think it's almost like perfect. I enjoyed Spider-Man, like the way that he is very flawed, and we're kind of meeting him like already into Spider-Man, so we're not really getting his origins off the bat. He is a mess pretty much. Like, he is not like the version of Spider-Man that we've gotten from the movies, and like sometimes they stumble, but this dude just seems like he got some issues, and it's just kind of like interesting the way that he's like, I guess the version of him that we're meeting is just like so different, and I think that's what's the opposite of a detriment? That's like a great thing for this show. I can't think. It's a great thing for this show because, again, you're doing another Spider-Man property. How do you set yourself apart? You put the fact that, like, this is not Peter. Well, first off, his name's Ben. But, like, this is not the Spider-Man that we know. This dude, he operates differently. And it's like, all right, cool. This is similar but brand new. New but different. And so I really enjoyed that. I liked all of the side characters. In fact, his secretary is probably my favorite character of the entire show. I was like, okay, cool. I didn't expect that to be a thing. The fact that it is like, it's the 50s or whatever, or not 50s, but it's like, it's like the 20s or whatever. And it is kind of like, people are saying little weird phrases, and Nick Cage is kind of like doing his over-the-top thing. Even in this world, people are like, what the hell is going on? But like, there is moments of like, no, people will die, they will get shot, and so there is a silliness and there is like a seriousness to it all, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, this is giving me a great time. It's very, again, watching in black and white, it is, kind of this like, not period piece, but it's set in a specific period. It really stands out. He doesn't even go by Spider-Man, he goes by the Spider. And so all of this felt like similar but different. It is goofy, it is serious, and it just ended up blending so well together that I was just like, wow, I'm so glad that this, was able to work out, again, being a Sony product. That being said, it doesn't come without some flaws, which is, there were some character choices that I was just kind of like, why is this character doing this? Why is this character not doing that? My theory is that it was part of like, because this movie is made during a certain time, right, or to be in a certain time period, it is taking homage from things from that time. And so if you watch like older movies like that, a lot of things just happen. There's not really like logical, like, how did you get from A to B? Is like people just like doing things. So I was like, all right. I do wish that there was, kind of logical reasons to why things were happening, and you can kind of surmise, but like, I think they could have done a little bit better. Obviously, more Spider-Man. All right, give us more Spider-Man. But that being said, even when they did do the CG, right, it didn't look that bad. Of course, it kind of looked like a video game, but like, it's a TV show, so I'm expecting a lower budget, and also I watched it in black and white, so it was like, there's even things are supposed to look even better in the dark when it comes to like CG, I think. So I was like, all right, cool, kind of worked out. So I just had to bring up that obviously like people are gonna be like, we want more Spider-Man. There was a character who was in this that I thought was annoying, and that was kind of the whole point of their character. But I was like, man, I just need you to stop. There was another character that they introduced that like kind of seemed like there was gonna be a bigger part of the plot, and then it just kind of like, that story ended, and I was like, okay, I guess we did that. I see why the character's here, but like, wish we would have done more with that. And there was subtle hints of like racism, but ultimately I don't think the show really like dove into it, and it didn't really pick a stance on it either. So there's like sprinklings of like racism or like racist things like here and there, but like it felt like the show was too afraid to actually tackle some of those things. And also, it's not really part of the show, but it was kind of like, if you're gonna put it, like, I want you to kind of like, get into it. You don't need to be extreme about it, but it just kind of felt like they were tiptoeing around it. And so I was like, pick, either have it in there and say something, or don't have it in there, and we'll just pretend like this is a world where it ain't that deep. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, yeah, the show is fantastic. I hope we get another season. I hope we get a couple more seasons. Not too many, all right? Just enough. Too many shows go way too long. I think if I had to give this a rating, I'd give this like an 8.5. Like, I love this series. This is probably going to be, one of my favorite shows for a while. We'll see if it sticks to the all-time, level of things. But yeah, I really love this, and I was so surprised that I got to the end of it and being like, wow, like, there really isn't too much that I don't like about this show. If you plan on watching this, let me know what you think after you've watched it, but we are going to get into spoilers, all right? So this is your time to leave in 3, 2. All right, so like I was saying, right, in the spoiler-free part, I always forget, we'll skip forward. I really love this show. I like that, Ben Reilly is, first off, he goes by the Spider and not Spider-Man. It already makes him different. I watched this in black and white. I really think it works with the whole aesthetic of like it being like the 20s or whatever, and him being like a PI and all of that stuff. I was like, all right, cool, this all works out. He is a mess, right? He's an alcoholic. It seemed like even when he had his girl, he was, the night that everything went down, he's like at a bar drinking, having a good time. When we meet him, he's like on his Spider-Man 2 journey where he's like, I don't want to be Spider-Man anymore. He's just he's constantly drinking in this show. And he's just kind of a mess. The fact that like he kept giving away his identity. So his friends do. The girl ended up finding out. I thought when he was fighting Sandman that he was gonna like reveal that he was also Spider. I was just like, damn, this dude's kind of like a mess for real. And it hits different, I think, not only because it is Spider-Man, and we've seen Spider-Man be a mess before, and he is always kind of like, Spider-Man, you could do better. But I think the fact that like the other ones are supposed to be like young adults / teenagers, whereas like this is like a grown man and he's still like a hot mess. I think this really just made it stand out, and it was just like, oh, okay, this does feel like a very different Spider-Man. And of course, it being Nick Cage, like, there were just moments where he's just like Nick Caging out, and even the characters are like, what is up with this guy? Like, what are you talking about? And then he's like, listen, man, just give me the, information or whatever, and let me get out of here. And I thought it was really interesting of like, Peter isn't necessarily like a wimp or whatever, but Spider, he's just kind of like a nerd. And then Spider-Man's the more charismatic one, where I found it really funny that like Ben, there are so many moments where he could be in trouble, and he's just kind of like being very like sarcastic, or just kind of like, whatever, like, I'm gonna get out of here, like, why are you guys bothering me? And it's just like, oh, okay, I didn't, like, you could get shot here. And he's just kind of like, you know, almost like fucking around. It's like, oh, okay, this is, again, just a different character, and I highly enjoyed it. His secretary, I like the fact that she like is willing to go out of her way and really help him. She knows she got connections, right? She goes to the police academy, or not, the police precinct, and like brings them whatever, those sandwiches or something, and she gets the information. The fact of like, I forget who shows up, but she's like standing there with a gun, like, yo, chest me. And I was like, oh, okay. But she does, you know, unexpectedly get almost attacked by those two guys, right? And she's like, I'm out of here, and also like, you're not paying me. And I just, you know, even she has her limits. So I was like, okay, cool. I like that. I like her character. I like what is his name, Robbie or whatever, the reporter guy who's like always trying to like get the story, but he's like, I want my story, I want my desk. He's just a man trying to get by and like doing his thing, and he's good at kind of getting where he needs to be at and getting the story. I was like, okay, cool. But sticking with him and sticking with Lonnie too, one of the issues I have with the show is just like, it doesn't say anything particularly about racism. Like, they're like, you know, Robbie finally gets his desk, and it's like back in the corner, and then shows like all the white characters kind of looking at him, and it was like, okay. And then there is a part where like the police are like beating up people in like this poor area, and then they see Robbie, and then he's like, well, yeah, I'm not a part of this, and they're like, it doesn't matter, and they go to like hit him. But like, I just felt like the show wasn't really, it was kind of like doing like racist things like here and there, but it didn't really like have a stance. And I was waiting for like, not a monologue, but like a serious moment of like, you know, I'm a black man in America type thing, and it just, I don't think we ever got there. So the fact that they kept kind of like doing like, oh look, we know it's time, you know, the time where like black people would have even a harder time here, like, see, we're doing it. It's just kind of like, I wish you would have just like either dove in a little harder, or just like don't do it at all. Like, I just don't like when period pieces or whatever try to do like racism, but they don't like actually like get into it. And again, I don't need something extreme. It's just like, you know, either have a statement or don't have a statement. I think just being like, look, little things of racism is just like not really enough, you know what I'm saying? And so and also it wasn't really clear like how racist like the city is, especially because the secretary is Latina. And so I was like, so do they have a problem with her? I don't know, because the world isn't really set on like where things stand. So it kind of felt ambiguous and like unneeded. Speaking of unneeded things, was Dr. Faber and her whole story of like, all right, she used to experiment, or she was trying to help the people that got experimented on, and, you know, including her son, who's like super old, but he's not supposed to be. And then we get to the part where, you know, she makes the antidote, and she's like, wait, I'm trying to help everyone, and then they kill her, and that's like, cool, now we have an antidote. And it just kind of felt like, why is she here? I wish they would have just like, you know, everyone would have gotten the information somehow to like find this lab, and then, you know, things kind of would have went down from there. But I just felt like that story just kind of like ended, and the whole reason it was even there was to get to the antidote. And so it's kind of like, I kind of wish this was a little integrated more. That being said, his like origin of him being bit by like a half Spider-Man was like terrifying. And again, not like, you know, the usual story of like, oh, you bit by a spider. Like, this is a full-on like horror movie. I like that. It is, again, a sense of like this weird like fucked up world, but it's also like kind of like silly sometimes or whatever. Speaking of, you know, the powers and everything, was I forget his actual name because he's not what I thought. Dirk, I think. The guy who's basically like Electro. That guy sucked. Like, he kept doing like monologues and like stuff and like that, and he just kept talking. I was just like, I don't like this guy, and I know that's the point, that he was annoying, but I'm just kind of like, I don't like this dude. Lonnie and Flint, I thought, you know, they were decent. Flint and Kat are kind of where I have some issues of like, okay, they're in love with each other, and Flint feels like he has, he owes Silvermane something, and it just like isn't working out, and the two of them could leave, but they're not going to because he feels like he has to stay. And then Kat goes to the subway, and the only reason she gets caught is because Ben shows up because he's doing his investigation. And then she's like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of like, here, and almost like she's like trapped. And the whole time I kept being like, well, it seemed so easy for her to get to the train station. Why wouldn't she just run away? Especially because like Flint isn't really her man anymore. And so I just didn't understand why she would stay, because it wasn't like she was like trapped in her room, because we see her hang out with Ben and she's like, well, be able to just get in a car and like go around town. So for me, there was like no real reason, once like the relationship kind of seemed like it like separated, for her to stick around. So I was like, why doesn't she just like hop on a bus and never get seen again? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It would have made more sense of like if she actually did hop on another train and then there was a scene of like, all right, boss, we found her, the next city over, you know what I'm saying? And then it was like, oh, like Silvermane's so obsessed with her that he won't let her go even if she does run away. But because we didn't get that, I was just kind of like, why is she here? That being said, the mayor was like really adamant of like getting away from like Silvermane's thumb and like taking power back from the city. And once Silvermane got all the powered characters, it was like, so what's your plan here, mayor? Because all you got is the police, and they're pretty useless against these dudes. And there was even a part where the police chief was just like, they got superpowered people, what the hell you want me to do? Like, I'm gonna go home. Like, fuck you. And it was just kind of like, there is no clear reason for the mayor to keep going. So I was just kind of like, are they gonna give him something of where he gets an edge? Oh no, okay, weird. Ben falling in love with Kat was weird. At first it seemed like two lonely people just kind of like, hooking up. Sometimes you're sad, you get with the wrong relationship. It happens to the best of us. But then he was like in love, and then they're gonna like run away together, and I was like, this is moving way too fast. But this is what I was saying in the spoiler-free part of like, sometimes you watch like, like older movies, like from the 30s or whatever, I watched in like college classes. And this is the kind of stuff that would happen of just like, oh, I've met you this weekend, but now I love you and we should run away and get married together and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if they're just doing this simply as an homage to like this older style of like TV show and movie of just like things just kind of happening without there really being too much logic to it. But for me, just like watching a show, nowadays, I was like, there's no reason the two of them should be in love. And I kind of wish it was just like a fling, or there was more of them just kind of like, hooking up more, and like more situationship and less of like, oh my god, we're in love, we're gonna run away together. And so yeah, all that being said, those are kind of like the biggest negatives I have of the show. But other than that, yeah, I really enjoyed him as the Spider and him being Ben. I think, finding out the whole, like, everyone came from the same troop and is this big experiment, like, makes things really interesting, and like makes the Spider way more connected to the villains than it seemed like. I was like, all right, cool. And the way that the mix of like practical and like CG effects gives like kind of sticks with the tone and the aesthetic of the show is like very well done. Yeah, I just had like a really good time with the show. I can't really think of any more specifics, and I don't want to make this video too long, but I just really enjoyed this show, even though I had that whole section a few minutes ago about all the negative things. Like, I walked away being like, man, this is such a great show. 8.5 out of 10. Like, I really hope they do a second season. Give us a couple more seasons and you can call it a day. We don't need to run the show into the ground. So that being said, let me know what you thought of this show down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, peace.